Hi YouTube, it's Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery. You can find me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. Okay, so this is the continuation of the first video where we're taking this Natural Whetstone Company Soft Arkansas and we are wringing it out. Okay, we're seeing, first of all, we looked at it, well no, I had it already conditioned to like a 220 grit or so. So we took this side, and it's the side that's got a G on it, right? And we glazed it over, not as bad as we could get it glazed over, but you know, I mean, we took it, we oiled it up, and then we took this, well, we took an old cleaver and we bored down really hard on this thing and really wore out the top of the stone. Then we wiped all the oil off and just for extra measure went ahead and rubbed it dry for a little bit. Then we took the Victorinox tinker and we looked at the edge that was already on it, which was silicon carbide, roughly a 320, 400 gritish, something like that edge, which is what's left over from the last video that I shot on the fine side of the silicon carbide combination stone. So we took a look at that edge, then we went ahead and we sharpened it on this glazed side, right? Now what we have is an edge from the glazed stone. Actually, we'll pull it up again right quick so you can see it. Just so that you know, I mean, these were supposed to be a series, but maybe not everybody is you know, maybe you come in, you know, on this video instead of the first one. Okay, so this is the edge that we're working with. This scratch pattern right here is really fine, and to me the scratches look, the scratches don't look crisp. You know, the scratches up at the edge don't look crisp. They look kind of rounded over, kind of like the difference between a tomato that was cut with a sharp knife and you got a nice sharp edge on the edge of the tomato, and one that was cut with a duller knife, you know, so that nife puts an awful lot of pressure, kind of mashes the tomato a little bit, and then finally rips it. That's what this is looking like to me. Okay. We also talked about seeing as how this stone wasn't cutting very aggressively. We've got three different angles in this same edge. This one this part of the edge right here doesn't look quite as bad as the other part that we looked at, but I can still see it. So we've got, you know, our edge bevels probably start right about in here. You can't hardly see that. That's where this scratch pattern, let's move it up some. There, so that's the whole edge. You can see your edge bevel starts from here, comes all the way up to here, and it's all here, and it's all pretty much one angle, right? Then from here to here, from, what was it, here to here or so, is a different angle. Probably when I was talking about oil stones not being very efficient when they were dull and people raising up angles just to get through the sharpening job faster. That might have been that case. And then from here to here is our micro bevel. Okay, so we're going to go ahead. That's the edge that we're cutting with. We're doing the rope cutting test. This is manila rope. It's 3-strand manila rope from Home Depot. I buy it by the roll. From the last video, you take your wood block, your rope, and your hand, and you see about what that weighs on the scale. The last time I was doing it, I tried keeping it around 2 pounds, something like that. Okay, you try to kind of keep the rope tight, you know, when it's twisted like that. And we're going to measure the force required to make the first cut. We're also listening for the sound that the edge makes going through that first cut. I did this on the last video, but let's pop some hair off my arm. So we got hair coming off, so we know it's kind of sharp. So we're looking at the weight, the amount of pressure for the first cut, the sound of that first cut, and how kind of aggressively it goes through that rope. Then we're going to make 50 cuts, and then we're going to do another one that we really listen close to the sound, the amount of force it takes to make that cut, and then kind of the feel of the knife through that cut. Okay, so we're at 1 to 2 pounds. That's 10 pounds. 15 to 16 pounds is our first cut. So let's write that down in case I forget. 15 to 16 pounds for our first cut. Now that correlates really well to what I've found over the years for polished edges versus toothy edges. Do I still have the stickum note? I think I threw the stickum note with our other notes away, but I want to say this knife was making a cut in the rope at 8 pounds with that 300 to 400 grit edge. So this was 15 to 16 pounds. So let's go ahead and make 50 cuts. There's 40. Okay, here's the 50th cut. There's a pound or two to hold the rope steady. About 20 pounds or so. So we've gained 5 pounds worth of force. 5 pounds worth of force over 50 cuts. So the gaining 5 pounds part, that part is cool, but the fact that our force is up that high, that is not so cool. Okay, so let's take a look at what's left of the edge. Okay, so what we've got left of this edge here, any tooth that we had is now gone. Okay, it's really, really smooth. Okay, which is why we had to put so much force on there. Instead of that blade cutting through the rope, now we're having to shear the rope with each cut. Okay, which is why our force was so high, which is why I don't particularly care for this polished edge type of stuff. It does, you know, I mean, if you polish it a little bit higher, this will end up looking like a mirror, you know, and that kind of looks cool to impress your friends, you know, and everything. And it will cut receipt paper with much less noise than what a toothier edge will do. But, you know, I carry a knife so that it makes my life easier, okay? So that when I need to cut something, I pull that knife out and the knife cuts it. It doesn't slide and I have to force the knife through it to be able to part whatever it is that I'm cutting. Let's say you come up on an accident, right? And there's somebody in the car and they're hanging upside down, the car's on fire, they're bleeding all over the place, and they can't get their seatbelt off. Okay, the last thing that you need at that point is a knife with a polished edge that you have to shear through that seat belt to get that person free to be able to pull them out of the vehicle. You want a knife that's going to get into that seat belt and rip the crap out of it in one cut, nice and clean, very little pressure, so that you can get that person out and get them away from the car before it explodes or they bleed out or, you know, whatever, right? Knives are tools. Use them like they're supposed to be. Okay, so that's my take on a polished edge. So now we're going to see if we can't do a little bit better. Okay, so this is the stone. Well, wait a minute. Now let's pull you back over here. Sorry, I was going on my rant for polished edges. I'm sure polished edges work good for something, but not anything really in my life. Well, straight razor. You know, I like a polished edge on a knife that I'm going to shave the hair off my face with. Okay, so this right here is our 50 grit finish on this stone. So a soft arc is typically thought of as a, what, 600 to 800 grit stone? Okay, so that means that your particle size here is going to be 600 to 800, maybe 1,000, you know, who knows. So that's what our particle size is. Okay, now around those particles are our 50 grit scratch pattern from our Thumbler's, coarse grit that I used to lap it on this plate glass. Okay, so now this is what we've got cutting. Now this feels very aggressive to my fingertips. Okay, you might even be able to hear it. Okay, it doesn't feel like needles or anything, but it does feel, it feels abrasive. Okay, all right, so we got a 50 grit surface on our stone. Let's put a little bit of oil on here. And let's see what it cuts this pocket knife like. Okay, so first impressions, it is cutting. It is cutting fairly aggressively. Oh, there it comes. There we go. Now we got our burr. It's cutting aggressively, but it's not. It doesn't quite feel right. Okay, it feels kind of like. Not really sure how to explain it, but it. It feels like the scratch pattern on the stone is too coarse. Okay, now we got the burr on the other side. It's cutting aggressively, but it's not cutting quite right. Now our burr's moved over. Not quite yet. There we go. Okay, now we can lighten up our pressure and start weakening that burr and preparing it to get it removed. Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell, kind of describe that feeling there. The way this stone is feeling up underneath the steel right now. Okay, so our burr is nice and weakened and prepared, so now let's go ahead and shear it off. It kind of sort of feels like a large version of that drywall texture that I was telling you about in the last video. Like the flat spots of the texture aren't really fine enough to cut. It's kind of an odd feeling. Okay, so let's take a look at our edge. Oh, that's right, we had the stone on here last, didn't we? Okay. So that's what we've got on our edge. You know, these scratches still look a little bit rounded over. You know, the edges of the scratches look a little bit rounded over, and then up at the edge, the very edge, you know, we still don't have a whole lot of tooth. I remember this stone cutting and leaving a fairly good tooth pattern when it was done. So we'll go ahead and test this out and see what happens. But this does kind of look like what it was feeling like underneath, what it was feeling like on the stone. It was kind of like there was these big particles that it was like skating over the top of instead of being cut. Yeah, I guess that's about the best way I can describe it. So let's do a little bit of rope cutting here and find out. You know, the last time that I did this, it was feeling kind of the same way, but I didn't say anything because I wasn't sure if, oh, let's first, I'm running out of hair here, but yeah, it's popping some hairs off. But I didn't want to say anything. I wanted to kind of, you know, see how the test went as we went. Okay, so there's 1 to 2 pounds. We got 10 to 12 pounds on that cut. You know, let's do that again just to double check. Yeah, 10 to 12 pounds. So see there? That's already dropped our edge or our force considerably. So 10 to 12. And then we're still going to go 50 cuts. So now let's go ahead and do our 50 cuts. That edge feels a lot better, but it's still not there yet. That was what, 6? .46. That's 50. Okay. So now we'll check for. I don't feel anything bent over there. Okay, so there's our 1 to 2 pounds. 14 to 15. Okay, so let's go 14 to 15. So now we've gained, you know, on the low side of 10 to the high side of 5, or 15, so that would be 5, so, you know, 2 to 5 pounds. You know, which we're getting there, you know, I mean, that's not too shabby there. That's an edge that I would almost carry. Okay, now see, our scratch pattern is still looking to me better than what it was on the glazed stone. And kind of see hints of teeth. These right here looks like they were teeth that were bent over that haven't broken off yet. And this looks real smooth. You know, kind of okay, kind of not really. Alright, so let's go ahead and take our stone and we'll go ahead and lap it. Let me wash it off first, and then we'll lap it to 220. Okay, so we got all the oil off of it. Let's do some of this Thumbler's Fine 120 to 220. I'm going to go a little bit more since this is a fairly large stone. You know, 10 by 3. Now remember, with the finer grit powder, you use less water. Okay? Make sure, okay, the G is our glazed side, so we're going to go with the non-glazed side. Now we're starting to stick. Okay, we're knocking that surface down quite a bit. So what we're going to try to do here is we're going to try to use this powder in such a manner that we actually go finer than the 120 to 220. And then, you know, as the powder breaks down, it'll cut a little bit finer. But then at the very end, we'll wash everything off, put fresh powder on, and that way we get a nice clean 120, 220 grit finish. Okay, we're getting there. But not quite yet. Alright, let's rinse it off and see where we're at. I think we're pretty close. Yeah, we're getting pretty close. That stone's starting to feel pretty smooth. You know, this way you also get kind of a real-time view onto how long it takes to lap one of these 10 by 3s. I think when we go to do the hard arc version of this test, I've got a Dan's translucent that's an 8 by 2, and I think that's going to be a much better size because there's much less surface area to lap. There we go. Okay. Okay, so that right there feels like we're at a little bit finer than the powder that we're using. So we'll rinse everything off, finalize our conditioning. Okay, so everything's rinsed off. I'm going to take some of this excess water off of here. Throw a little bit of our 220 powder back down. Okay, now very lightly, for just a couple of passes, that's about all we're going to want. Okay, so we are at, well, we can take a look at the stone. I'm afraid all we're going to see is water. Let's see, let's reset this. Go to that. We can see a little bit through the water. Remember, it seems like every time it takes this water quite a bit of time to get out of the way so that we can see what we're looking at. But we can see now that the particle size is much closer to our scratch pattern size. At least that's what I see here. Okay? So let's go ahead and get this over here, get ourselves set up. Okay, get that wiped off. A little bit of oil here. Now this right here is the grit that I normally dress these stones to. That feels pretty dang good. It feels like we still have some of the 50 grit surface underneath it. But the majority of that feeling of it skating on, you know, like the drywall texture is pretty much gone. Let's see if this side got done a little bit better. There, yeah, it did. That burr is almost there. There we go. Okay, now we'll do our last little bit of weakening and shear that burr off. That feels pretty good. See if it'll take some hair off. Yeah, it's popping hairs pretty good. Okay, so now we look at the edge underneath the scope. There we go. Now I'm starting to like this quite a bit better. I think, honestly, I think I probably should have spent a little bit more time on the 220 grit finish here. It doesn't feel like everything is down to 220 grit. I mean, it feels pretty close, but not quite. And our scratch pattern is looking nicer. The edges are starting to look clear. Our edge, you can see, has got more tooth to it. Okay, so let's see, we got 29 minutes. Let's just do a real quick rope cutting test. Okay, so about a pound or so for the rope in my hand and everything. 8, I think. Yeah, 8 or so. Now that's starting to feel quite a bit better. So we're going to go 8 there. I think I've got oil on my pad. There we go. So we got 8 at the bottom. So let's do 50 cuts. Okay, so that was 50. Not feeling anything too bad there. Okay, there's a pound. About 13, 14. Eight to 13, 14. So that's, you know, you can tell that we're getting closer because the glazed one was a real polished edge. I don't particularly care for those. The 50 grit was better than the glazed, but it's not quite where it needs to be. Like I said, it feels like there's big plateaus on the top of the stone that aren't cutting like they should be. Now we're getting back down in the range where I'm thinking, okay, this stone might be a keeper. So, you know, but I honestly, I don't think I did a very good job lapping it to the 220 grit. And you know, I try to keep these videos to a maximum of about 30 minutes because otherwise stitching them together in the software kind of gets to be a pain in the butt. So I think honestly what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get this in this video and get it uploading. And then I'm going to spend probably another 5-10 minutes working this stone on the 220 grit powder. And get it to, you know, finish getting it to where I think that's where it's, you know, where it's going to be happy at. And then we'll start the next video with the stone that's already ready to go. I'll sharpen up the edge again. Oh, wait a minute. Here. We'll see this before we end. Ah, come on. Okay, so you can see what we've got is a worn, kind of toothy edge. Yeah, I think we can do better with this with some more lapping on that stone at 220 grit. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and do that, and then what I may end up doing is actually doing like some editing and stuff. And on the last video, because we've still got the pre-polish and the polish to go through, I might try that out. Yeah. So stay tuned. I'm going to go ahead and go take you inside, get these videos downloaded or uploaded, whichever way that works, and then come out, finish dressing this stone down to a 220, and we're going to repeat that test. I think we can. I think that stone's got some more in it. So anyway, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery. You can visit me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we will see you here in a little bit.